Joining us now, Gary Berntsen, Senior National Security Advisor for Concerned Veterans for America. How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing fine, John. Good morning.
Now, let's get right to your background. You've got a little knowledge about some of this that's coming out of the CIA. Can you share with our audience the perspective that you have and where you've come from?
Yeah, well, of course, I served for almost 24 years in CIA's clandestine service. I was a chief of station on 3 separate occasions. That's the senior CIA person in country running operations. I led CIA's efforts in East Africa after they blew up our embassies in Tanzania and Kenya. And I led CIA's Jawbreaker team during the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks. So I have a long history doing counterterrorism in CIA. What I'd like to say first off is about the report, and I was on television yesterday trying to be very careful about this because I hadn't read the full report yet, but last night I had time to go into that document, and I have to say that this is the single largest hit job on the CIA since the publication by Philip Agee of Inside the Company, and he was run by the Cuban government when he did that. It clearly was a one-sided assault by Democratic staffers and Dianne Feinstein on the CIA as a parting gift to that organization with her departure as the chairman of that committee. It's a shame. And it's a shameful thing that they did because that document now will be read, cut up, parsed, and used by Salafist Islamic terrorists around the world as they will use that document as a recruitment tool against the U.S. like it is nobody's business. We are in a period of time now that is much greater danger that the United States faces as opposed to 2001 because ISIS and these other groups are a lot larger, have a lot larger number of Europeans with passports that can enter the U.S. There are many, many threats that we are facing right now, and what she did was totally unnecessary and it was reckless.
Well, I know him well because I covered him extensively in Georgia. Ranking minority member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Saxby Chambliss, yesterday, if you saw him on TV, became unglued, and he said that his staff came to him early on and said, look, we're not even going to get involved in this because they have an agenda. And so they're going through these documents, and they have a predetermined hypothesis in mind. So basically they're going to create a document that simply supports their hypothesis. Is that true?
I didn't see Saxby Chambliss. I respect him. He's been a responsible member of that committee over the years. I believe what he says, and my reading of the document shows that they really didn't understand a lot of things in the sense of the intel world. It's like they accuse the agency and they're hostile to the agency for hiring contractors. Well, the agency historically has used contractors for all sorts of things, for aircraft, for boats, for all sorts of services. They did attacks on the agency in saying that there was no that the information was collected in other areas. What they don't realize is sometimes you get a lead from an interrogation, and then you use that in SIGINT. That's how you get back around in signals intelligence. They don't realize, too, that a lot of senior operations officers and people in the field, and if you're out in the field for weeks or months at a time and a lot of things are going on, you're putting a lot of stuff down on paper, but there's a lot in the heads of these senior ops people that are out there that sometimes isn't captured, that sort of drives their decision-making, which means you must interview people. You must interview people, and they interviewed no one. This was a $40 million hit job by the U.S. Senate Committee for Intelligence's Democratic staff.
Common Sense News Time, 9:18. Gary, before I get a word from our sponsors, let's go back to the report itself. The key elements that you think where this was really flawed, what are they?
Well, one of the points that they make here, and it's part of the discussion here, is the whole issue of waterboarding. And the reality is there were only 3 individuals waterboarded. It was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Zubaydah, and one other, Nasiri. The first 2 had both been in the position of number 3 in Al-Qaeda. And the reason they were targeted and the reason we used those extreme measures against them is it was believed that they had information on imminent catastrophic attacks on the United States. And that was what drove this entire process. And it's just there's no recognition of this, an appropriate recognition of this in that report about what was the goal of this. And of course, they try to throw as much dirty laundry as possible out there from every possible angle. It's just it wasn't a balanced report. It didn't address the issues. It didn't recognize the fact that the interrogations allowed us to destroy the entire second tier of al-Qaeda. Zawahiri, number 2, and bin Laden, number 1, went into hiding. That second tier were driving the operations and the planned attacks. And the United States never suffered a second catastrophic attack from al-Qaeda in that opening decade. In this continuing struggle, and it was because of this program,
right,
and because of the activities of the Central Intelligence Agency, which this Senate is just sort of thrown out in the street.
Well, you're right, because there was many people thought there was going to be a second wave coming. That never happened. There hasn't been an attack on our soil since 9/11. So now you're going back and saying, well, the CIA's interrogation tactics had nothing to do with it. It's fine now because nothing happened. Gary Berntsen. Gary, the bottom line of this thing is we just had, about an hour ago, we had Congressman from the 3rd District of Virginia, Bobby Scott, on endorsing this report and basically saying, look, we don't torture. Torture's illegal. We don't torture. We executed Japanese interrogators after World War II for torturing our people. Nobody's denied this was torture. How do you respond to that?
Well, let me say this, that the Constitution of the United States is not a suicide pact. We live in a day and age where small numbers of people can leverage technology to kill millions. What are we going to do when the first ISIS guy shows up on our shore that we capture with maybe half, part of a binary weapon, which is a bioweapon or a chemical weapon? What happens? And, people say that the ticking bomb, theory isn't real. Well, I've worked on the ticking bomb theory many times in my career. I've captured dozens of people that were bombers. And many of these things happened at the last minute. And the reality is we live in a world where we're going to lose a lot of folks if we're not careful. 9/11 was just the opener in what is a multi-decade battle with Islamic jihadists. They're leveraging technology. We need to recognize that there may be a time where we need to do enhanced interrogations if we are facing the death of millions of Americans. And there are attacks that can do such. All you got to do is look around the world and look at what's happened when you see Ebola in Africa. The Soviets in the 1990s, under a bioweapons program, were attempting to blend Ebola with anthrax. The man who wrote the book on that, Kazhatkin Alabekin, wrote a book called Biohazard. He defected to the U.S. where he told us that story. There are very difficult, dirty things going on in this world. We need to fight them to keep our families safe. And if we were faced with such a situation, I would enhance interrogate somebody immediately to save millions, and I would gladly go to jail for that.
I tell you what, you can't get a more honest and strident, on target statement than that. I've got to tell you, Gary, earlier before you were on, our phone was ringing off the hook, probably 9:01. People saying, I don't really care what the CIA does. These people are chopping our heads off, our citizens, our captives' heads off. They're torturing us. Who cares? Yeah, well,
the thing is this is we are a democratic nation. We're the greatest country in the history of mankind. We've done more for the planet than any country. And we have to protect our citizens. And there are people out there, and you look at ISIS, these are monsters. And we only did waterboarding to 3 people. They make it seem like we did it to 3,000. We did it to 3 people who had information on imminent catastrophic attacks on the United States. And I go back to Lincoln's comment. The Constitution is not a suicide document.
Gary, you look at the ISIL situation. We have no declaration of war. Obama refuses to go to Congress. He just sent in another 1,500 troops. I've got about a minute remaining. How do we stop this thing? What do we need to do?
We need to be able, those troops that are on the ground out there need to be able to call in air support. those few people that we do put on the ground, and we need special operators there, need to have wider latitude to protect themselves and to complete the mission. We should declare war on ISIS. They've declared war on us. If we do not enter this thing more aggressively right now, we will ultimately wind up with a major attack on the United States, and it will result ultimately of 400,000 or 500,000 Americans on the ground out there suppressing this thing. We are in the 1930s right now. Just people don't recognize it. We've got to stop ISIS and Islamic jihadists now.
Do we send in troops?
We're sending in troops already. Small number. Look, during the invasion in 2001, 135 CIA officers and 350 special operators using air power defeated 70,000 members of the Taliban and 5,000 to 7,000 members of Al-Qaeda. We don't need a lot of people. Not if you've got the right people and you've got the right authorities.
All right, that's going to be the final word. You want to follow Gary on Twitter. It's at Gary Berntsen, Berntsen, at Gary Berntsen. You can follow him there. You can also follow me at JF Radio Show. And if you want more information on Concerned Veterans for America, get off the sidelines and get involved. This is the #1 veterans organization in America. They get things done. They pick up the phone. They knock on doors. They do a lot with a very little. Check them out. Go to CV4A, CV4A.org, CV4A.org. We want to thank Gary Berntsen for being with us. As always, Gary, great to have you on, man.
Thank you, John. God bless you.